now, this will be part B. This is the real lecture. The last part was all announcements. Now the audio quality is good. We did it. Everything's falling apart. Let's talk. It's the end of the semester. This is what happens, right? All right, here we go. Natural selection. Let's talk. Well, evolution. Let's talk about it. Natural selection. Let's talk about it. I did my Darwin talk. We're fine. We're good. We're great. We loved it. Okay. We're going to move on now to the requirements for evolution, how we measure it, etc., etc. Okay. Here we go. Darwin's key observations, which are going to be linked tightly to the requirements for evolution. Okay. There's some amount of variability in a population. Members of a population often vary in their inherited traits. All right. So look at all these ladybirds, okay? They've all got different numbers of spots and slightly different coloration. They have variability in their phenotypes, and that variability is genetically encoded. That's necessary for evolution to happen, all right? You need different alleles in order for allele frequencies to shift over time. Species produce more offspring than the environment can support. Many of the offspring fail to survive and reproduce. What does this mean? The organisms that do survive and reproduce, well, they were the ones that had the genetics that were better suited to their environment, all right? And therefore, okay, the next generation will have more of the genes that are better suited to their environment. Now, this is specifically a natural selection situation. There are other ways that allele frequencies can shift. It's not always that the next population has better genetics. Sometimes the next population has different genetics because of some force besides nature selecting for different phenotypes. So here were Darwin's main conclusions. Individuals that have traits that give them a higher probability of survival are going to leave more offspring, and therefore the genes encoding those traits are going to increase in frequency in the population over time. Favorable traits in the population accrue over generations. Solid stuff. So this explained, hey, why do individuals seem so well suited to their environments? It's because from generation to generation, nature has selected certain phenotypes. Nature has selected certain genotypes, all right? And those alleles, those forms of the genes, become more prevalent in the population. Natural selection, okay? So I want to, I don't have a working marker here. There's never a working marker. Why would today be any different? That's okay. All right, there is this term, evolution. Evolution is an umbrella term. I have drawn for you an umbrella. This is what an umbrella looks like. Underneath this umbrella term of evolution, we have things like natural selection. Natural selection is a force that can lead to evolution. We also have things like sexual selection. Sexual selection is a force that can lead to evolution of a population. We also have genetic drift, okay? Genetic drift, which is another force that can lead to evolution, all right? Very good stuff. So while we're talking about natural selection right now, it is important to note that evolution and natural selection are not synonymous terms, okay? Natural selection is specifically when nature is selecting for certain phenotypes, all right? There's a certain phenotype survives better, so the genes that it has become more represented in the population. That phenotype becomes more common. It becomes more elaborated over time. That's natural selection, which is very different from these other forces right here, okay? Cool. Cool. So we talked about this already. Certain traits reproduce at a higher rate. This has to do with fitness from an evolutionary perspective. Fitness describes how many offspring you produce, all right, into the next generation that are actually going to be viable and reproduce themselves. All right? So higher fitness indicates that you leave more offspring that survive into the next generation. Okay? So natural selection, it's the only type of evolution, it's the only mechanism of evolution that will consistently, bless you, lead to adaptations for a given environment. I'm going to talk about some of the other types of the other forces that lead to evolution, but I want to point out, like, natural selection is the one that will always lead to adaptation. And if you have natural selection and evolution as synonyms in your mind, you have a fundamental misunderstanding of what people are talking about when they say evolution. All right? Because evolution is the umbrella term, and natural selection is one type of force that leads to evolution. Okay, slide 15. That's good that that text is still there. Really stoked. Okay? So, evolution. What is evolution? Do I have a good definition here for you? Of course I don't. Well, that's on me. My mistake and my apology. Apology. So what I'm going to do is define evolution for you right here. Do I have a sheet of paper maybe? Nope. Does somebody have a sheet of paper that they'd be willing to? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, document camera for the main projector. And a writing utensil. Okay. Evolution. Can't believe I forgot to put the slide up that has the definition. It seems like something very important. What is it? It is a shift in allele frequencies in a population. Okay? That's it. Evolution's pretty broad and general. It's an umbrella term, right? So this is not necessarily always going to lead to more beneficial alleles, all right? So when we talked about Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium and you were seeing if a population was in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium or not in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, right? If the population is not in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, it's evolving, but that doesn't imply any sort of directionality here. It might not be evolving towards being better. The population is just experiencing a shift in allele frequencies. So different versions of the genes are becoming more and less prevalent. So that's evolution, and that's all it means, okay? So I really want to tease these terms apart with you today. Questions about that? Yes?
So people say stuff like certain things are more evolved. Can't really be more evolved than another thing.
Yeah, saying something's more evolved doesn't make any sense. I mean, we have a common vernacular for like more evolved thinking and things like that, which people say, oh, these people are more evolved in their ideas, you know, but that's not biological evolution. Biological evolution just indicates genes have shifted in frequencies over time, or allele forms, gene forms, alleles have shifted over time, right? So yeah, there's not really a directionality to it. You can have evolution that actually leads a species or a population to extinction or extirpation, right? And it's still evolution. That population just got unlucky and accrued a bunch of alleles that ended up being detrimental to them or made them less suited to their environment. Awesome. So, yeah, individuals can acclimate, okay? Like, I had to walk a bunch of stairs and it felt really hot, and so I sweated. And so I acclimated to those conditions a little bit, all right? I acclimated to the higher temperature in my body. I acclimated to the conditions. You sweat, you shiver, these are all acclimation responses. Or, you know, if a plant starts to develop a deeper root system. An individual can acclimate to its environment, but it doesn't adapt. And that's another term that we use in the common parlance incorrectly a lot. You say like, hey, you got to adapt to this. And you can say, hey, I'm not capable of that because I'm not a population over time. And you'll make a lot of friends doing that and talking like that to people, okay? Anyways, individuals can acclimate, but adaptation and evolution are specifically processes that occur in populations over time, because remember what evolution is. Evolution is a shift in allele frequencies in a population. So that has to happen, it's an overtime process. Cool. Adaptations vary with different environments. Pretty straightforward there. It makes, bless you. All right, no problem. Yeah. Oh, and also natural selection can only operate on variability that's already in the population. So, natural selection, that's how it works. You can have evolution happen through an immigration event, okay, or an emigration event, where new alleles are brought into a population or some alleles are removed from a population. That shifts allele frequencies too. And the population still evolves, all right, just by some individuals leaving. Because what's our definition of evolution? It's a shift in allele frequencies in a population, all right? Cool. Evolution, all right. There's a lot of evidence to support that evolution has occurred, okay? We've got things like homologous structures in organisms where you can see the wing of the bat, the flipper of the whale, the arm of the cat, and the arm of the human, the leg of the cat. A cat doesn't have arms, does it? But there are these structures which can be identified as homologous structures. They all have similar origins in embryogenesis. They have very similar compositions. So at one point, there was an organ. So the idea here is that these are all elaborations of the same bone that has changed slightly over time due to shifts in allele frequencies that encoded the development of that bone. All right, homologous structures provide evidence for evolution. Direct observations of resistance being evolved in a population, where we call it, artificial selection usually, or sometimes you call it natural, but here's the point, right? You apply a bunch of poison, you kill all the mosquitoes, except for 10% of the mosquitoes survive, and they all have alleles that encode DDT resistance, all right? The population is going to quickly increase in frequencies of the alleles that encode for DDT resistance. So this is a direct observation of evolution in action, where allele frequencies are shifting over time due to this selective pressure being the presence of the insecticide, all right? So this is observed direct evolution of a population, where it becomes more and more DDT resistant, all right? Lots of direct, let me throw artificial selection onto this, since we're going to talk about it too. All right. Cool. Great. So a lot of the direct observations of evolution in action come from rapidly reproducing organisms. So in bacteriology, you get a lot of studies that are like, hey, look, we showed that this population evolved to use a different food supply, okay? Because you can sequence them and say, hey, they got these genes. It's fine. It's fine. We don't need to go down a huge rabbit hole in discussing this stuff. That's okay, all right? But this is evidence of evolution occurring. This is evidence of common ancestry and evolution occurring, okay? You talk about phylogenetic trees and how organisms are closely related to one another, all right? How they have similar, they have similar characteristics. This is all evolution evidence. Here's a hyrax. You all know hyraxes. You love them? Yeah, they're super cute. You can't really see here they have tusks. They're related to elephants, all right? They're as closely related to elephants as manatees are, which is pretty wild. You've got all these extinct species right here, but what's that? Oh yeah, typos. This thing's full of typos, right? Yeah, it's a great little autocorrect thing. It's really helpful, It's not like it has access to all the information in the world and could look these up, But anyway, common ancestry, homologous structures, these things give evidence for evolution. If you look at embryology, right, embryos tend to look pretty similar as they develop, but then there are just shifts in development. This all is also cited as evidence for evolution. Molecular homology, you look at the sequence of nucleotides between different organisms, and you find that there's a lot of portions of the genome that all have the same sequence, once again indicating like, hey, these used to all be probably one thing, and then over time there have been shifts in frequencies of alleles, shifts in the sequence, and that's led to the variety of life we see around us. Fascinating stuff. You've seen this, boom. There's a lot of background unnecessary, a lot of like evolution evidence stuff, which I'm not going to dwell on because we've only got a little bit of time left, unfortunately, together this semester. And I would like to focus on other things. Okay, Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. You did a problem in lab, you did it on your lab final, you've now experienced Hardy-Weinberg calculations, okay? So, if the semester was going way faster, I have these slides in here so that I can do a Hardy-Weinberg problem with you, and talk about it all. But you've already spoken about this, okay? So instead, what I'm going to be focusing on is what are the conditions to maintain Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, okay? So check this out. A population's in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium if it's not evolving. That's the whole purpose of the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, is to see if a population's evolving. So if you've got a table like this that tells you the conditions for maintaining Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, it tells you the conditions necessary for evolution not to occur. So if you want to know the conditions necessary for evolution to occur, you just need to think about the opposite of these conditions. It's pretty circuitous, but I think it's fun to realize like, hey, this table actually has a lot more information than you see just at surface level. Anyway, so the opposite of these conditions are the conditions for evolution to occur. All right? Check this out. First condition, no mutations. If there's no mutations, allele frequencies don't shift, right? Fair enough? So if there are mutations, allele frequencies could shift. There could be evolution. If mating isn't random, well, then allele frequencies could shift. If certain genes make it more likely that you're going to produce offspring, well, then the population could evolve, all right? It's not necessarily natural selection because you're not becoming better suited to your environment, but you have a higher fitness because you're passing on more copies of your genes. You're making more offspring. Natural selection is a requirement here. So if there's no natural selection, the population won't evolve, right? Really, what this is saying is all of these have to be met for there to be no, evolution. So, natural selection. If some genotypes are better suited to the environment, the population is going to evolve. Extremely large population size. If the population size is small, it's very likely that there are going to be random processes where certain alleles just get eliminated from the population entirely. If there's only 10 beetles in a population and a tree falls and it just happens to kill all the purple beetles, now there's no more purple genes, okay, in the population. That's a massive shift in allele frequencies, all right? So a large population buffers these changes, these random changes in allele frequencies, these random changes being being grouped together under the term genetic drift. So genetic drift is sort of another umbrella term that has all of these random processes that have nothing to do with increased fitness. Yeah? Exactly. Bottleneck effect, founder effect, other one, the third thing. Yeah, I can never come up with a third thing, it's no good. Then gene flow, all right? No gene flow. So if you have immigration or emigration events, those either introduce new alleles or remove new alleles, or at least they can shift allele frequencies, because if you have a bunch of individuals come in to that beetle population, a bunch of purple beetles come in, well, now you've shifted the allele frequency to having more purple alleles. Or if all the purple beetles just happen to leave the area, even though they don't die, you've removed those purple alleles from the gene pool, from the population, all right? So that's why I really wanted to point out, like, this is the definition for evolution. It's a shift in allele frequencies, okay? It doesn't have anything to do with, is that shift beneficial, all right? Do I have any questions about that? Because I want you to leave this course using the word evolution correctly, and then using natural selection correctly. Question, please.
So evolution it doesn't have to be positive.
No.
But natural selection has to be positive.
Natural selection it's the only force that consistently leads to adaptation. So it's the only force that makes a population better suited to its environment.
Okay. Whereas evolution could do the opposite.
It could totally do the opposite.
That's why it's not the same.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, an evolution is just a shift in allele frequencies. It might not be giving you more beneficial alleles, all right?
So natural selection is those beneficial adaptations.
Yes, yeah. And the adaptation term is a population accrues them, it makes them better suited to their environment. Yeah. Of course, awesome. So there's this example that I like to use of sexual selection that indicates how you could have non-random mating, all right, which is a force that can lead to evolution, but that can also be detrimental. And I'll be honest with you, this has been mostly disproved, but the story is so good that I still reference it, okay? There's this extinct species of elk called the Irish elk. They have massive horns or antlers when you find them, and they're they find their dead ones. What am I trying to say? Fossils, things like that. Remains, that's what I'm trying to talk to you about, all right? Here's the old story was, hey, this population, the only elk that were able to breed were those with massive antlers. Are they antlers? Does an elk have antlers? Okay, good, thank you. An elk has antlers, all right? Only ones that could breed were those with massive antlers. So you kept shifting the allele frequencies towards bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger antlers. Eventually, you get a population of elk with antlers that are so large that they can no longer effectively move through the forest, and the population goes extinct. All right? That was a theory out there. You know, a lot of evidence to support that there's other things that led to the extinction of the Irish elk, but that's a fun story, at least, that illustrates how something that's not natural selection could lead you to generating phenotypes that aren't as adapted to their environment. All right? And sexual selection does that sometimes. It's not really beneficial for peacocks to have the male peacocks have those absurd big tail feathers, but having those absurd big tail feathers makes it more likely that you're going to mate, which means that you're going to pass on the genes for big tails, all right? Big ornamented tails, okay? Initially, there's a benefit in sexual selection, usually, of, hey, if I do that weird, like, blue-footed booby dance, it indicates that I have to be coordinated, and that coordination requires, like, oh, I must have at least decent genetics, okay? So sexual selection evolved because it was a way to screen for genetics, all right? Being able to carry those big tail feathers, survive, and then produce the symmetry, those are all indicators of healthy genotype, all right? So sexual selection isn't like a bad thing that didn't exist for any purpose. It just can go out of control in populations. It's very interesting. But anyways, the Hardy-Weinberg problem, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this problem. We don't have time for this problem, and that's okay. Natural selection, genetic drift, gene flow, these things can all alter allele frequencies in a population. On top of that, we've also got artificial selection, sexual selection, okay? So if they can alter allele frequencies, then they lead to evolution, by definition. Okay, genetic drift, random event, nothing to do with fitness, all right? So check it out, right? Founder effect, that's when you've got a population that gets established, and it's a small population, and they can have a much different allele frequency than the parent population they came from because it's a smaller pool. It's very similar to the genetic bottleneck effect, all right? So there's a community on the East Coast where polydactyly is very prevalent because there was a group of individuals who immigrated into the East Coast and set up a smaller community, and they happen to have high frequency of the alleles for polydactyly. So now in that population effectively evolved, okay, to have extra finger, all right, have an extra finger. It's not really a detrimental phenotype or anything, so though that phenotypic frequency hasn't shifted too drastically, but it's pretty interesting, okay? So you take a big parent population, you get a subset of it, it's like the toxic newt problem. That's founder effect stuff, all right? It's an example of genetic drift. Genetic drift, it's all about, is it random, okay? Bottleneck effect, bunch of individuals perish from a population, you're left with a smaller subset of the population that have different allele frequencies. There's the original population, there were yellow marbles in that population. Bottlenecking effect shrinks the population down, removes some alleles entirely, removes some phenotypes, but not because they weren't as suited to their environment. It's just a rapid reduction or a large reduction in population size can drastically shift allele frequencies. So it's also an evolutionary process, right? When we're talking, we don't have time. We just don't have time for it. Yeah, we do. What am I saying? All right, check it out. When you're talking about evolution, you're talking about shifts in phenotypes, all right? Sometimes you talk about directionality of selection. Sometimes natural selection makes phenotypes shift towards one extreme. On any given phenotype, the phenotype usually falls along a bell-shaped curve in the population, where there's a super common phenotype, and then there are a few individuals with deviations from that common phenotype. Sometimes you have stabilizing selection where the common phenotype becomes more and more and more common, so there are fewer individuals at the extremes. Sometimes you have disruptive selection where the intermediate most common phenotype is actually selected against, so you get more individuals on the extreme. Sometimes you have directional selection where the population shifts towards one of the more extreme phenotypes. Solid. I don't have an exam question about that, I promise. Sexual selection. In sexual selection, some individuals are more likely to mate. If you're more likely to mate, you're going to pass your alleles on more. It leads to big, showy phenotypes like this because individuals with the bigger tails reproduce more, therefore they have higher fitness, even if they're not necessarily better suited to their environment. All it takes to have higher fitness from an evolution perspective is to make more offspring, pass your alleles on more, increase the frequency of your genes in the next population, all right? That's biological evolutionary fitness. Okay, cool. Yeah, and this could be bad, right? Good stuff. Heterozygote advantage, this is fine, We don't need to worry about that. We're just running so far out of time. Oh, cool, we have oh, never mind, real quick. Sometimes heterozygotes have an advantage, okay? So homozygous dominant could be doing great. Homozygous recessive could be doing poorly, right? Where the homozygous recessive phenotype is actually very detrimental because you have two non-functioning versions of a gene. Oh no, that's bad, right? But the heterozygote might have some sort of advantage, and therefore you get selection for the heterozygous phenotype. It's very, very interesting. It's a different force, okay, that can lead to evolution that encourages prevalence of both the dominant and the recessive allele. So even though the recessive allele, if you have two copies of it, is harmful, having one copy is beneficial, so it's maintained in the population. So, you know, you've got the example of sickle cell anemia, right? If you have two copies of the sickle cell allele, then you've got an intense version where you've got all sickle-celled red blood cells, all right? Blood clotting occurs, you get anoxia, okay? Your cells can't carry blood as well. It's really negative. But if you're heterozygous, okay, you have some normal red blood cells, you have reduced blood clotting, and you still have a decent oxygen carrying capacity in your blood. Also, you're highly resistant to malaria. So if you're in an area where malaria is a major selective pressure, all right, then being heterozygous is really beneficial. So there's a heterozygote advantage here, all right? Solid? Cool. Yeah, we won't worry about this, we won't worry about this, we won't worry about this. Speciation, all right? So how do you go all the way to, how do you get from evolution, where it just shifts in allele frequencies, to actual speciation events, where you get an entirely new species? And what is a species? First, a species. Individuals that can mate and produce a viable offspring are members of the same species. That's our biological species concept, all right? There are different definitions of species that are out there, but that's the definition that biologists use, and as we've established, biology is the best science, so all the definitions in biology are the best. All right, we've all accepted it, you're all complicit. Okay, very good. So, speciation can happen either within a single habitat or, when you get individuals here's the thing. Speciation happens when individuals become reproductively isolated, okay? You might have a bunch of individuals that are in the same area, okay, but they start to change their behaviors. So a subpopulation starts to feed at a different time of day. So now they don't, or at a different level of the canopy or a different portion of the ocean. Okay, there's a name for that, the different layers that I'm forgetting right now. The point is, if you're not interacting all the time because of some behavioral change, then you're not breeding, and therefore you have two separate breeding populations, which over time are going to undergo evolutionary processes differently and can eventually become so different that they're incapable of breeding with each other. And that's an example of sympatric speciation. Okay, sympatric speciation occurs in the same location. The other mechanism for speciation, bless you, is allopatric speciation. Allo meaning other. That's the same word root as allele, another form. Yeah, please. Yeah.
There's salamanders that are all over up and down California. I know that some salamanders that are closely related, because they can't breed with each other, they're too far away. Is that also considered, like, because I know that the closer they are, the more higher probability that they can breed with each other.
Yeah.
Especially if they're like closely, but they're considered two different species because if they're too far away from each other, from Northern California to Southern California, they can't breed with each other.
That's a different species concept. So that's why they're defined as different species. And it's a really good point. To bring up, like, well, if you're talking about the biological species concept, what's the other species concept? And here's sort of the most common one that's also promoted. Let's say there's a mountain range right here, and there's a population of moths over here, and there's a population of moths over here. Now, if you take them into a lab, if you take them into a little dark room and you give them some time alone, they can breed and make more moths. So the biological species concept would say they're the same species, but they're never actually going to interact in the wild because they can't get over this mountain range. Same as a salamander example that you're talking about right there, right? So some concepts would say they are already separate species because a species actively breeds together. All right, so it's all about how you define the term, right? Yeah, no problem. And over time, this could fit into the biological species concept because over time, if they're isolated, they're going to be reproductively isolated and accrue their own differences, where eventually, if you take them to a lab, they're incapable of breeding. So it's kind of just, are you waiting until that happens, or are you calling them separate species now? And it really does matter and have an important, it has important consequences, because if they're different species, then there's different protections, and you define them as rare or endangered differently, all right? If they're all one species, there's plenty of salamanders, but if there are a dozen different species, well then there are 12 endangered species, and now you can't do any development on that watershed, you see? So there's a serious consequence of which definition you use. I love that question, really solid. Yes, and then I'll come down to you.
What about the species or the situation where two separate species can breed with each other, but they can't breed an offspring?
Totally. So that's another definition question, right? If the offspring's usually in the biological species concept, you must be able to make a viable offspring. And that doesn't just mean that it can survive, it means that it's capable of making offspring as well, right? That it could then cross as well. And different species, different definitions can deal with, here's an example. Right? You know, you got the dang old, what is it? Horse and a donkey make a mule. Yeah, right? With the mules, okay? They can't really, they're not very good as an example of being the same species. They're clearly a new species. They can't breed anymore and make viable offspring. But if you look at the lion and the tiger, right? With the lion and the tiger, and you have the liger produced, right? Those can make viable offspring. You just need to do like in vitro fertilization and embryo implantation. So if you put both of them into a room and have them breed, they can't make viable offspring, but they can do it with human intervention. So now are they different species or are they the same species? It's a definition question, is the real answer. Cool? Yes? Individuals that can breed and make viable offspring are members of the same species. Okay, cool. When populations get isolated spatially, and then they're reproductively isolated, that's allopatric speciation. When behavioral changes happen, or there's something strange in replication of the chromosomes that leads to polyploidy, and they become genetically incompatible, but it's in the same area, that's sympatric speciation. All right. Reproductive isolation is what leads to speciation, okay? And that's all we really need to worry about there. We got through all the material for the course. We only have 5 minutes left, but I will open it up to some questions. However, before we do that, I just want to say 2 things. 1, thank you so much for being a part of Biology 105. You've made it a genuine pleasure. And 2, if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm a very wholesome follow. I just post pictures of field trips and like my Christmas decorations and, you know, food. So give me a follow. The number goes up and it makes me feel good about myself. All right. That's Bio 105. Thank you all so much. Let's go ahead and do a Q&A session. I saw a hand. Let's go. The only thing on the exam from this PowerPoint is really the requirements for natural selection, okay? So check this slide with the, where's that dang giraffe? Check this giraffe slide and this slide here, and these cover those things about like the population needs to already have variability in it. Some individuals need to survive more than others. That's the only thing from this PowerPoint that's really on there. Good deal. Yes? Operators and roles of repressors. Ready? Here we go. Boom. Here we go. Operon. Right? Big cluster of genes. Gene A, gene B, gene C, mons. All right? You've got an operator right here. You've got a promoter right here. Okay? Promoter, RNA polymerase can bind to it. All right? There's something that can bind to the operator. All right? And if it binds, no transcription. So it silences the gene.
If it binds, there's no transcription.
Exactly. This is called the repressor.
And the repressor that binds to the operator, that's the repressor, basically.
The thing that binds to the operator is the repressor.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem. Solid?
Yep.
So yeah, if the repressor can't bind, then the genes are always turned on. If the if the operator is always bound, all right, then the genes cannot be activated, cannot be turned on. Solid? I love it. Make sure you remember repressible and inducible operators. Check them out in the PowerPoints. All right, previous lectures. Additional questions? Anything about the exam? Anything at all? You have some questions for me? Yeah. It's good. This is my last thing I have. This is my last class of the whole semester. And yeah, I'm going to go have enchiladas after this. I'm very excited about it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Please an applause break for enchiladas. Yeah. 33 questions worth 3.3 points each, right? And then 1 point, free point for just having your name on the Scantron. All multiple choice, and many of them are drawn from previous exams. It's cumulative, okay? Yeah. Yes, please.
Is your office hours still happen during finals?
My office hours don't still happen during finals week, but I do have a little bit of time right now. I can chat with anybody who wants to talk about something, but I don't have office hours during finals week. You could email me, you know. Yeah. Yes?
Do you have any time so we can get our exams back today?
You can come and visit your exams, but I will never give you back your exams. You can come look at them today right after class, and if you did extra credit assignments, you got to take them home, but I don't return exams. It's just my policy, you know? And, you know, it's not the most popular policy, but dang it, I'm not running a popularity contest. I really am. All I care about is how much all of you like me. But, yeah, and how many followers I have. But, yeah, on paper, I'm not running a popularity contest, right? Cool. Thank you all. I think we did it. Okay, it's done. Thank you all. You're the best. You're the best. Yay, one more class down. Let's go. Keep your heads up. Keep your chins up.
Enjoy your enchiladas.
They're going to be great. I think they're pork. Yeah. Well, let me turn off the recording since this is just all. Goodbye.